Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our monthly Lawrence SharePoint user group meeting. We're really thrilled today to have Nakia Carter with us. She's going to share the importance of SharePoint community. And Nakia and I have been crossing paths here and there in the community at different events. Most recently, I think, would have been SharePoint Saturday Denver. So I'm really excited to hear her take on the importance of the place where we met. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to her at this point.
Ah, Thank you so much, Nate. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am in a different time zone from you guys, but we're both still in the evening time. So, good evening, unless you're joining from a different place in the world. Thank you for joining for this session. And I am going to talk about the importance of SharePoint community, but the importance of the tech community in general as well. So my name is Nakia Carter. A little bit about me. I used to own a company called Carter McGowan Services. I sold that company, became the director for C3 Integrated Solutions. I now work at Microsoft as the worldwide modern workplace tech strategy lead. And as you can see, I used to be an applications developer before I got into some SharePoint development. And I've been in the IT industry for quite a while now. You could see some of the things that I've done, like being a tech speaker and a published author, and some of my former roles, which I've had to kind of shed being a Microsoft, being a Microsoft employee until I can get my feet completely under me, and then we'll see where we go from there. Feel free to reach out to me. Here's some of my information. I'll also show it again at the end of the my talk. Feel free to put your questions in the question and answer window. I will be keeping an eye on it to see if there are any questions, and I will try to answer them as soon as I can. Also, feel free to tweet at me, tweet at the user group, and I think I even have the hashtag and the at handles um, on the slides in my deck. So if you didn't get this one, um, my Twitter handle, there'll be other times where you'll be able to get it. But we definitely appreciate, and I'm sure the user group will also appreciate tweeting as we go. So technology is changing at the speed of the cloud, right? There is, whoops, there have been a lot of changes over the years. I mean, think about it. All of these changes just to SharePoint server alone. And then we, of course, so here's a little timeline. We, of course, had changes to the relevant technologies that a lot of people used that work also with SharePoint. And then if we also look at all the other like surrounding technologies for building on top of SharePoint, the different languages that have come up, the different scripting languages, the different platforms to actually write your code in, the different ways to deliver your code to the platform to inject, all of that has grown. And not to mention like the cloud. So now we have Azure, which you can actually put a SharePoint server into. You can actually do that without having your own hardware, since Azure is infrastructure in the cloud. And Office 365, which is now actually M365 or Microsoft 365, which encompasses more than just Office 365, but it includes SharePoint. Then add on to some more things. We got Teams, we got Power Apps, we got Flow, we got Power BI, Planner, Dynamics. The list just keeps on growing. Whoops, I forgot this. This slide builds out. I forgot about that. The list just keeps on growing. The momentum is getting kind of ridiculous in a way. I mean, it's good because it keeps us all employed, but it's getting kind of ridiculous. There are over 135 million active users. That is growing every day for Office 365. Teams has exploded. Fortune 100, Fortune 500, global. Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 1000 companies, all are in the Microsoft cloud. All are, or not maybe all, most are using SharePoint technology. And that rate is not slowing down, it is getting worse. I don't expect it to get any better at any time soon. And that is just the nature of the beast. So you may say, okay, that's all good. I understand from a technology point of view why this is important. But sometimes it's important to actually narrow that down and make it more important to you. Why is it important to you? So what's the woofum, which is what's in it for me? So in order for you to kind of get an understanding of why it may be important to you, let me just bring you up to speed on why it's important to me. This is a picture of when I was about 4 years old. Humble beginnings, as it says over the top of the picture. I grew up one of 4 siblings. Only, let me see, a few of my siblings are showing here. Actually, all of my siblings are showing here. I think I was about 5 or 6 in this picture. Grew up in inner city Baltimore. Grew up poor, so we didn't have a lot growing up. But I made my life change, and that's because of a few different things. First of all, there was a path to learning, learning about technology, learning about coding, which is where I started off in my career. I started with getting a few different exposures to code that helped me that helped change the trajectory of my life. One is when I got starting from right to left, and if you don't recognize this picture, from Baltimore, as I said, this is a picture from one of the most influential parts of Baltimore for me, a place that I've passed a lot at growing up, walking through things like that. So this brings back a lot of memories for me, this picture. But if you start on the right-hand side, you see a computer. Well, it doesn't look like a computer, it probably looks like a keyboard to you. But really, it is a computer. It is a Tandy Color Computer 3. This is what my dad had given me when I was, I don't know, I think I was 8 or 9. He actually bought it for me and my siblings. He saved up a lot of money because I think it was like $400 or $500. That was a lot of money back then, especially if you're growing up poor. So my dad, he saved up this money. He believed that computers were the wave of the future. So he made sure he got us one. He couldn't get us all individual ones. We had to share. But it came with this book called Getting Started with Extended Color Basic. And I thought, that seems interesting. Let me crack this puppy open and read it and see what's going on. Well, it was a book to help you start learning how to code in BASIC. And it was really cool. So I taught myself BASIC out of that book. And I realized, I actually have a knack for this. This was pretty easy to me, and I enjoyed doing it. That was when I was in elementary school. Fast forward to high school, the middle picture or icon, logo, is for Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. That is a citywide school, or you might think of it as a magnet school, depending on what locality you're in. They're called different things. Basically, it's a public school that you get recruited into, kind of like a charter school, maybe for now. But it was the highest school in the city. I had actually graduated with honors in science and the top of my class in science, but the school was a engineering and science school. So I had a lot of classes in science with genetics and biology and anatomy and things like that. On the other side in engineering, I had things like woodworking and architecture and a bunch of different things like that. But I had one class and extended basic, which is really funny, but I'm sure they have way more classes now in computer science, but they only had the one class. That class was super easy to me because I just had the knack and I had the pre-exposure to basics. So I was kind of bored in the class until I started helping others, trying to teach people, in some cases, kind of almost doing their work, well, really doing their work for them, for those hopeless people that just could not, their brains could not think that way. But that merely made me think that this is the path for me. This is where I need to go. I need to go into technology and the coding. I love it and it's interesting and it's pretty easy. I wonder how much harder it can get. So I went to Towson University. First, I actually went to Howard University for my first year. Then I transferred back home to Towson. At Towson, I furthered my education in computer science by getting a bachelor's degree in computer science. That led me to, after graduation, to first of all, I couldn't find a job in Baltimore. I worked a whole lot of odds and end jobs. Then I started applying like everywhere. I was like, screw it, I'll just apply everywhere until I can find that place where I can get a job and actually start my career. So that landed me into a place called King George, Virginia. And this picture is showing you like the highway that goes into King George. Um, King George is one of those places where people are like, what? Even people from the area. So I lived in the DMV, which is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, in the DC metropolitan area, but you know that area can be rather large. So I was very much on the outskirts. So I didn't even know where I was going. It took me 4 hours to make it to the interview for CSC, which is that second picture, because I got lost and I was 4 hours late for the interview. I'm sorry, it took me like 5 or 6 hours and I was 4 hours late for the interview. But I ended up working for CSC. And during that time, a few months later was when 9/11 happened. CSC is a government contractor and they deal with government contracts. The base is right there in the picture too. If you see the fence on this left-hand side, that's where the base is. So we served the base, which was NAVC, the next picture along there. But because I was new, the clearance process was already slow to begin with, and I didn't have a clearance at that time. I got let go. After about 8 months, I ended up getting hired by the government after some poking and prodding around. So I worked directly as a federal employee for NAVC, which is NSWC Dahlgren, which is the base called Dahlgren for the Navy, as a computer scientist. At CSC, I worked on a bunch of different languages, mostly Java. I taught myself Java during that time. I learned Ada to do a few different projects, taught myself that. Learned CMS2, which is the Navy language, which is horrible. Never, ever, ever want to do that again. But there was a few different things I learned and picked up as I had to complete certain little projects to keep me going until I got let go. Then when I went to NAVC, I was a government employee and I basically had the same thing where I had to learn things on the fly to do these projects where I rotated around to different departments. So it was always something different. Oh, I just learned C#, but you don't use C# here. I got to learn Visual Basic now. Great. To keep it moving all the time. I had to learn more about Java beans and things like that. So I did a whole plethora of other languages that I got under my belt. And the only time that I actually had a team was one time. Every time I was the only, except for that one time, I was the only developer, which got pretty lonely. CACI was where I ended up going after I left the government. And I stayed there for 2.5 years and again picked up more languages and platforms to code on, um, and different scripting methods and things like that. And this time I did have a team. I was so used to, though, just keeping everything to myself that sometimes I would make the role, I mean, not the role, the project last a little bit longer. But then after a while, my boss was just like, look, you could just ask sometimes, you know. So that's when I first started realizing, oh, if I have other people around me, I can actually use the community of people around me to accelerate my, to help accelerate uh, my learnings and my growth and help me with projects so that I'm not sitting and hurting myself trying to figure out what to do. Then next, I ended up getting into SharePoint. First, I went to have an interview with a company called, um, I forgot how they say it, that Second Corp. Yeah, sorry, it's right under the logo. Second Corp. Um, and they approached me and asked, um, "Hey, you do code. You should be able to do SharePoint." And I was like, yeah, sure. Why the heck not? I should be able to do SharePoint. Didn't know what it was, didn't know it from Adam. So I was like, sure, it's just ASPX pages. It could be so hard about that. Um, During this time, I ended up I was pregnant actually. And I decided to go to SDC instead, who I actually actively pursued after finding out about SharePoint from Second Corps. But SDC I went with because they actually were in my county, and I didn't want to have to commute an hour being pregnant to Second Corps, and possibly being uncomfortable. So I went to STC. I learned all about SharePoint. I had people around me. They weren't as community based, so I didn't have as much support. They just expected me to just learn things by myself, which was cool, and I did learn, but it wasn't quick enough for them. Um, and I ended up leaving there, and I was not very happy. But that led to the whole going from app development to SharePoint development. That led to a big increase in my pay. I went from being someone who I think I earned 70, I think, thousand or something like that, to the like, it was like $25,000 increase. So that was cool. But then I started to realize, well, um, sometimes having that community of people around you is very important for your career, even though that hefty chunk of change did help. So from there, I went to work for Booz Allen Hamilton, and that's where I did SharePoint uh, 2007 and 2010. So I furthered my career. I became one of those people that was one of the few people at a place that knew SharePoint. So even though Booz Allen Hamilton is like 25,000 people worldwide then, there were very few SharePoint people. So I kind of became the guru, and I started establishing myself and networking within Booz Allen, because Booz Allen is a consultant firm. You have to pretty much, between you and your job, your um, your main manager, your main manager is actually responsible for helping you find work. But sometimes they're so overwhelmed with work themselves that they don't get around to you. So my boss, because I learned how to navigate and network in Booz Allen so well, that she never had to really find me any work. Plus, because my skills were so sought after, um, I got to do a whole lot more with SharePoint 2007 and 2010 that she never had to worry about me. But this was when I tripped into the user groups. I started with FedSpug and Women in SharePoint, and then I found SugDC, and that's where I mainly made a home, and I actually became SugDC's president up until I joined Microsoft I did that for maybe about 2 years or so. Um, but those communities of SharePoint people helped me so much to jump from the knowledge that I had to this explosion of knowledge of how to do things differently, thinking about how to do the um, development just a little bit differently. Did you try using this technology? Hearing the different presenters, getting my learnings from Booz Allen on how to network, I applied that to networking at these user groups. So I ended up becoming a person that was known to a lot of people, that I knew a lot of people. I could get help from a bunch of different places. And that led me to saying, hey, I know how much, because one day I found out how much Booz Allen was actually charging people and how much I was getting paid out of what they were charging people. And I was just like, what? This doesn't seem fair. I know how to network. I know, I have a network of people now. I could go do this myself. Around this time, SharePoint Online and Office 365 had come out. So I had actually started my own business called Carter McGowan Services. And I left Booz Allen and I did that business for about 6 years and 8 months until I sold that business to C3 and became their director of collaboration and training. There are also, as Carter McGowan Services, I still continue to do some SharePoint 2007 and 2010, but as the years progressed, I moved more into SharePoint Online. During all of these years, my networking, my outreach into the community, I started reaching out into business groups where I started networking there, going to events, meeting people. I joined IAMCP, which is the International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners in DC, networked there. Ended up getting a wealth of opportunity that just came at me. And of course, I took advantage of all the opportunities that I had enough time in the day to take advantage of, and sometimes more than enough, more over the time of day that I actually had. And, kind of drove myself into the ground a little bit. But anyway, I ended up running the SharePoint user group in DC. I spoke at a lot of different SharePoint Saturdays. I've spoken at SP TechCons. I've spoken at Texas's Tech. I forget what they called that conference. It was Tech. Um anyway, it's a tech conference in Texas. I've gone and spoken there like 3 times. I've spoken at Microsoft Inspire, which used to be called the Worldwide Partner Conference. It's the big conference for Microsoft partners. I've went there, spoken. I used to be on 2 Microsoft boards. I was on the IAMCP board. There was articles written about me, articles that I wrote, different publications that Microsoft published about me. I got to go to China because of one of my boards that I was on. And I got opportunities given to me, like being able to write for the Redmond magazine, only because one of my SharePoint community friends, who was also a partner, she sold her business and was like, hey, I want you to write because I was supposed to write for them. I recommended that you write for them. I did. I was able to get approached to do the books that I did. I've done, it's only showing 3 right here. 2 of those are videos, but I've done 2 books now, and I've done 2 videos. And I was actually approached by PACT to do that. I did not reach out to them. They reached out to me, to eventually getting beamed up by the mothership, which is where I am now. All of this is to say that networking and being a part of the community, and networking in the community, but being a part of the community and learning from the community is so super valuable, especially if you use it. If you use those connections, if you ask questions, if you introduce yourself to people, if you say yes to opportunities, um, all of that helps. All of that helps with building your brand, building your knowledge, but also building your brand so that you become that person that people trust, that people look to. Even if you don't decide to have your own company, even if you just decide to, I just want to work for other people, that's fine. But what happens when you want to move? If you don't know anybody, you don't have a network, you don't have an easy way to move. If you don't know anybody, you don't have a way to even know that there are opportunities out there except for the way that everybody else knows by going to ZipRecruiter or all the job boards. Um, Having the foot in the door by knowing people, they know you, they trust you, will get you in the door a lot faster than you just going to a job board. That's how I got my job at Microsoft. And I actually looked back and realized that it took me less time than most people take to get into Microsoft who have been doing the same amount of work um, and have the same amount of bona fides or more than I did. And that's because I took time in every community that I joined, not only to learn, but to network. So community is very important for both of those things. And you should make sure that you're taking advantage of that. Also, people will just reach out to you with opportunities that you might not have even have known were there because they see you on Twitter, they see you out here speaking, um, they see you at the user groups, and they know you and they feel like they can trust you. They will reach out and say, "Hey, would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? Would you like to come work for me? And I'm going to pay you $25,000 more than the last guy did." Um, you just never know the opportunities you're going to get without the community. No person is a community unto themselves. Here are some of the user group and speaking engagements that I've been a part of, and I'm in a couple of these pictures. I don't know if you can see me, but again, fabulous group of folks. Some of these people are from other countries that are in these pictures, like Canada, and I see my one of my friends from Europe, one of my friends that got beamed up to the mothership as well. Um, Lots of different people. There's also food, of course, that's at a lot of these events, but don't go for the food. You can always go get food. Go for the people, go for the connection, go for the knowledge that you can get. All of that is very valuable to your career. And keep moving forward. You always got to continually follow the circle of life, as I like to say in technology. Uh, Teach. Um, you want to. I'm sorry. My throat. Teach, collaborate, exchange, learn. Even if you can't teach on the global stage, you don't have to be a speaker. Just teach the next person next to you. Teach, mentor somebody. Um, Share your knowledge. That's what I mean by teach. Collaborate, work with other people, share ideas. Even if they're not even at your own company, you can still share ideas with other people, especially if you're at those user groups. That way you get to learn, oh, I could have done it this way. Your way is a little bit better, or let me share my way. And the other people are like, oh, yeah. Again, all of that helps you build your brand too. It helps you define your personal brand. It helps you to get your name out there. So don't forget to keep moving forward and keep paying it forward too. You don't want to use everything just for your own personal gain all the time. It's a give and a get, a give and a get. People will remember and appreciate those people that actually give um, selfishly, unselfishly, sorry, give unselfishly of their time and and their knowledge, and will give back to you. And don't don't um, don't feel intimidated by people that you feel know more than you, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes, but you can't see it, because I may know more than you, or I may not. But say, for instance, I do. There's things that you could teach me. I go to other people's sessions all the time, talk to other people that um, feel like they don't have anything to teach me. And they say something, and I'm like, wow, I'm glad I talked to you. I would not have known that if I hadn't talked to you. So remember, when you're in the community, to give and to get. It's also about networking. Um, and that will help you with building your personal brand. It will move you forward without you really having to try to struggle with moving yourself forward. I'm nearing the end of my presentation. I don't see any questions. I just want to make sure that you ask questions if you have questions. Um, but anyway, moving on. Don't be this guy. Okay, you see this this cartoon is hilarious to me, and just added the word SharePoint. He's like, you kids with your cloud and your computers and your SharePoint. Back in the day, I did, and he's not even that much older than the other guy that he's talking to. Um, if you stay stagnant in this field, if you stay in one place, if you're still doing the same thing today that you did 15, 20, maybe even 10 years ago, the same exact thing, you may end up becoming a dinosaur. And we all know what happened to them. Okay? Don't let that be you. All right. So, in closing, I want to give a big shout out to the Lawrence SharePoint user group. Thank you guys so much for letting me um, share my insights, share my experience. Hopefully, this has been helpful to you. I love giving to others, even though I work at Microsoft now. I may be harder I wouldn't say I'd be harder to reach. I may be sometimes slow to respond, but I will respond. I always love giving back. I know where I came from. I want to make sure everybody makes it to levels higher than they came from. It's only fair, and it's the American dream. I also want to give a big shout out to Fabian. Again, speaking about community, Fabian is one of those gurus in the community that I used to look up at like, oh, he is so far above me. But he is the nicest guy. And he actually gave me this presentation, which I modified, of course. But a lot of this presentation came from him. So he cut out a lot of my work. And if I hadn't been in the community, if I hadn't been um, talking to people, if I had been scared to say anything to him, he would never have become my friend. And I would not be giving this presentation today, or it would have been a whole lot harder for me to give the presentation because there was a lot of goodness in the slides that I just presented to you. Again, feel free to reach out to me. Here is my information. And I am done, and I did that in record time. Good grief. If there are any questions, please let me know. And Nate, I
Great.
will hand it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nikia. That was really just inspiring, I think. I really liked how you included some of your humble beginning stories because I think, especially people like me can relate to that. And we start out with something that, doesn't seem possible, and our family didn't necessarily, have the same opportunities as other families that I'd go to school with. And some things just don't seem possible until you just do it. Something falls in your lap sometimes. So hearing that was really inspiring. Could you tell us maybe a little bit about what got you interested in Microsoft, like why you said yes to that opportunity?
Um, I've always been in love with Microsoft. Even when I started my career and I first really got into the first Microsoft platform, which was coding C# in Visual Studio. I can't remember which version it was. In school, I learned a lot of C and C++ and some thing. What's that other language? That Pascal, things like that in college. But I did get to touch a lot of the Microsoft technology like Word and PowerPoint and all of that, and I just thought it was the the, the greatest technology. And then when email came out, because when I went to school the first year, you had to go to the school's computer room where there were fax machines, if you remember those. Maybe I am like super dating myself, but I don't care. Um, you had to go and do what they actually called snail mail back then, because it would take forever for your email to reach the other person sometimes. Um, and it was on the green screens. And then, like the next year, the very next year, email with Microsoft, at least I became aware of it, came out. I got my Hotmail account. I loved that account. I still have that same account. It's Lady Guinevere at hotmail.com, um, which is kind of crazy because nobody has Hotmail anymore. But I'm like, damn it, I'm keeping my account.
Mhm.
Um, so just being immersed in Microsoft technology, and then being my first project was to actually make a C# program. Well, actually, I chose what language to use. I was given a couple for this first project. I was given a couple of different ones. I looked up what they did, and I was like, "Yes, C# seems like the language for me. I love C#." Um, and then I had to learn how to use Visual Studio because in school they just had Borland. If any of you remember that, Borland C. Oh Lord, that platform is nothing like Visual Studio. So it took me a while to figure that part out. Luckily, somebody came along that was a transplant that already knew Visual Studio, so he showed me a few things over like 2 hours, and I was like, ah, okay, I got it. But the project was to um, grab to make a application that grabbed signals based on signals that were coming in from a certain thing, and I can't really tell you all the details for that. Um, that came in and give a report, spit out a report in Word. So I made the front end in C#, and then I used the database, which was actually, it was either in Access or it was in SQL. Um,
Hmm.
Pulled data through the front end based on whatever their configuration of choosings of their options that they did, and then spit out this report into Word. And I thought that was like super fun. It was challenging as heck, especially because for the first like 3 months, I was like, how does Visual Studio work? I can't figure this out. It was killing me. But I've always loved Microsoft technology. When I went to my other assignments, I had to do Visual Basic. I did some Java Beans and something else Java and JavaScript. Then from one of my other projects, I did like ASP Pages. ASP Pages, classic ASP with some I think it was JavaScript or Basics. I forget what the other one's called. Um, Visual Basic Script. I can't even
Maybe.
remember. I can't remember. That thing is so old. Um, but out of all of those things, that was my like most favorite project that I did. Um,
Awesome.
so like growing up with Microsoft, and I say growing up in a way because I was pretty much almost grown by then. I was, 19, 20, something like that. Um, Growing up in my career with the Microsoft technology, I just always loved it. Even like experiencing, I forget what there's an Office knockoff, um, Open Office,
Oh yeah, everyone.
experiencing that, when Google came out with their stuff. There was another one, a competitor. It was, what was it? There was a competitor one, and I just thought that Word and Microsoft's technologies were just way better.
Yeah.
So that kept me on the path of I just love Microsoft. And then when I got into um, working for other companies, the khaki and CSC, and besides the government, I was doing other languages which I liked, but I didn't get to really touch Microsoft stuff. But then when I got into SharePoint, I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is cool. And then I realized it could get cooler when 2010 came out. And then when it took the step of 2013 and then online and the App Store and all of that stuff, I was just, I've just always been in love with Microsoft technology,
Yeah.
basically.
2013 was a game changer.
Oh my gosh, was it? The App Store just really just, I was just like, what? I can get apps in SharePoint now. I love this. This is going to make my job so much easier, but it didn't. But you felt like it, at least for 2 seconds.
So you mentioned you've used 2007, 2010, and 2013, and one of the last things you said was you're mostly in SharePoint Online now. From all of those experiences, what would you say was the most positive from your end users' perspective?
Um, I think SharePoint Online. Now I run Modern Workplace for the field, so I lead partner technical architects that actually help partners to help customers with Microsoft technologies, with building certain things, with deploying like SharePoint or deploying Dynamics or whatever the technology is. So my role is more than SharePoint now. But
Mhm.
before I joined Microsoft, I was mostly working with SharePoint Online, um, and I just remember like when I started in SharePoint 2007, having to build a lot of stuff. There was a lot of InfoPath forms, which I love InfoPath to death, but let's face it, InfoPath has its has its shortcomings, like it's not mobile friendly. Got to the mobile age and everybody's like, this looks crappy on my phone. Why can't it look, okay? It
Mhm.
wasn't built for that. Look at it on your computer. What are you looking at on your phone anyway for? Um, so I think SharePoint Online, because it's mobile, because the store is there, because there are things that build into it like Flow, which makes it easy to make um, workflows that work with all the cloud technologies or a lot of them. Power Apps, which again does the same thing, works with a lot of cloud technologies that you can pull into SharePoint, but also it looks awesome on a phone. Um, I think SharePoint Online, of course, it's the latest and greatest and it's going to stay evergreen, but of course, it's the best one, I think.
Mhm. I agree.
Even though
So,
sometimes there's the frustration of not being able to build something and inject it into the server like you used to be able
right.
to just deploy farm solutions, but we all might remember how many things have broken because people deploy stuff they shouldn't have done.
Yep, I know I put a lot of time myself into building some things that just aren't compatible anymore, but there's always that
Hmm.
small piece of me that's like, it's probably for the best.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because then you get a chance to now. So people started lamenting in the SharePoint community, and I did for a minute too. Um, how they're like, oh, Microsoft is making things so easy. Only the end user will do this. So that means I'm going to be out of a job. No, again, that's what community is for, and that's what the keep on evolving, keep learning, keep growing comes in, because I lost some of my SharePoint dev stuff, so I wasn't writing as much code. I still write some JavaScript from here and there, but most of the time there was a widget or a web part to do. But I ended up thinking more creatively as far as not the coding, but how do I build a solution that incorporates a lot of different things like workflow process, and it's pretty. and it's available here and available mobile, and it's bringing in all this data from all these other different places. Um, and I could concentrate more on things like helping a customer figure out their business processes. So
Hmm.
I could devote more time to the actual helping them get their process right so that it was built once or maybe modified maybe two or three times, but not really modified the 15 billion times that would have to happen because I was so focused on, okay, hurry up and give me your workflow so I can build it. Now tweak it, now tweak it, now tweak it. I could actually help them tweak the process on paper
Yeah.
first, make sure all those ducks were in a row, and then build it, which led to less work down the line. But then I also added in skills for Office 365. So I did a lot of Office 365 deployments and migrations. I started doing a lot of training and adoption and change management things. So I kept it moving and I found things to replace the lost skills or the lost projects of being able to code becoming just as, if not more valuable to the customer, and definitely more valuable in the marketplace. Because now I had more skills behind me than just being a quote unquote just a developer.
Yeah. That's awesome. So one other thing I was thinking of as we were talking is some of those user groups you went to just seemed incredible, and you've really built this strong community no matter where you live. But for some people, myself included, who identify as introverts, it can be difficult. So like I can get in front of an audience and I can speak and I can do a full day of a conference. But what kills me is at the end of that conference day, they're like, all right, now we're doing a social hour. It's like, ugh. Just like, someone explained it to me once, like introverts have a finite amount of energy that they have to be careful how they spend, and when it's gone, they just need to rest and recover. So, what advice would you give to introverts, and do you identify with any of those kind of feelings yourself?
um, I I do in a way where um, I am mostly extroverted, so I do feel for you guys that are introverted. But as an extrovert, I do still run out of energy because it's just so much stuff all the
Yeah.
time, and a lot of people that want to talk to you all the time. It can be very draining. At the end of the day, I'm normally like pooped, especially after a conference, especially if the conference is multi-day and there's
Hmm.
extra events in the evening. I'm like blown. Um, and I'm mostly extroverted, but there are times where I don't feel like talking to anybody. I don't feel like doing this. Um, all I can say, being that I'm not an introvert, I can't really give, the the true advice because I'm not an introvert. Um, I can give a pep talk. Just say,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
worked.
yeah, go as much as you can. Excuse yourself when you have to. You have to look after you first. Because if you can't do it, then nobody else is going to do it for you. It's not like somebody else can give that talk. There are going to be times where you're just going to have to take a rain check. If you need to take a rain check, don't be scared to take a rain check. Just try to, instead of like, if somebody's trying to talk to you, just try to extricate yourself by saying, I'm sorry, I have like make up an excuse. I have a previous engagement to do, blah, blah, blah. Or just be like, look, dude, I'm tired. Okay. I'm blown. I can't function anymore. Here's my contact information. Let me get yours and I will get back to you.
That's
Um,
great.
you can only do so much, and if somebody is going to be a jerk about it, then let them be a jerk about it by themselves. You don't need to talk to them anyway,
Yep.
um, until they get their little act together. Because you're only human. You have to look after you. Look after
Mhm.
you as best as you can, and don't worry about anybody else. If you really need to go do some self care, go do that self care.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great advice, and that's a big topic, I think, not just in community and conferencing and all that, but the workplace as well. Just
Hmm.
finding that time to practice self-care when you've had, just a stressful 2 hours at the start of the day. How do you make it the rest of the way?
Yep,
So
I sometimes will just go for a walk if I get a minute,
yeah.
or I'll like get on my phone if I only have a couple of minutes or something like that, or take a get on my phone, call my husband, watch some YouTube videos that I have this video series. So he doesn't do them anymore, but this is a series called Equals Three, where he does like watches three different videos and comments on them. The guy is hilarious. So do something that's fun that you're interested in, even if it's only for a few minutes, or go for a walk, or just get up from your desk and go to the kitchen, or go and see your friend in the other office, or kind of like find the cubby where you can just hide for a minute. Because sometimes you got to hide. You can't sit at your desk sometimes. People will find you and be
Yep.
insistent on, I'm going to suck up your last 5 minutes, even though you need these minutes, but I need something more than you need these 5 minutes.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just got to go hide. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So one more question.
Hmm.
And thank you so much for your answers so far. The last one I have is just about some of your accomplishments in the community, and how you've managed a balance between being involved and being engaged, but also making time for family and, being able to keep going the next day.
Hmm.
Like, where do you draw the line and set those boundaries to get all that done? Because you've written 4 books, you said?
I've written 2 books and done 2 videos.
Oh,
Word to the
that's what it was. Yep.
wise,
So,
if you want to know about writing books, Lord, please talk to me first before you do it, because there's some things that will smack you in the face really hard, if you don't. And I did not realize it was going to be so hard, to
mhm.
write both of these books. And I don't know why I let them talk me into writing the second one. Telling you, talk to somebody who has written a book first before you go write a book. Sorry, that was
Mhm.
kind of like a side.
That's great advice.
Um, so it would not have been possible if it wasn't for my husband. I'll
Mhm.
just say that. Just that's first and foremost. Um, I get to be a pit bull with a bone or sock or whatever the heck you want to, somebody's leg. But no, pit bulls are sweet. I raised a lot of pit bulls. But anyway, um, I get to be one of those people that digs in and has a hard time letting go of things, which can sometimes lead me into being a serious workaholic. It got to be like that when I was at Booz, because there was especially one of my last projects. It was a project where we had a PM. It was me actually, I was a mid-level developer, and a entry level SharePoint developer who actually didn't know any SharePoint at all. So all the stuff that he was supposed to just kind of be helping me with, I had to teach him
Oh
and
dear.
figure out how to do things. And I had to write a whole bunch of JavaScript, which I had never written JavaScript before. So I had to learn JavaScript, teach him, keep the project going, because the project manager was managing like 6 different projects. So she wasn't there a lot, available a lot. I don't blame her. She just didn't have time. She was overworked. They did not staff the project completely right like they
Hmm.
should have. So there were a few times, I think at least 3 times, where I was up for 24 hours getting things out the door. And I was like that in school sometimes too, where my husband would just be like, we weren't married then, but he would come in and be like, it's 11 o'clock. So you think you're going to bed? I'm like, yeah, one more thing. And then he'd be up like around 12. It's midnight. It's been an hour. One more thing. Okay, go to bed, wake up, realize I'm not there. It's 2 a.m. Okay, now I'm putting my foot down. You're going to bed. Except for when I had to work, because, no one messes with the money.
Right, right.
But he has taken the pressure off me when it comes to sometimes knowing when to quit, because he can be as stubborn as I am, and he will put his foot down, and I will groan and moan and, piss around and stuff. But eventually I'm just like, okay, you have a point. I need to let this go. He's also been the one to, we have 3 kids. So he's also been the one to be the stay at home during all these events just seem to be kind of fortuitous. So sometimes you look back at your life and you're just like, wow, this set that in emotion, and this set that in emotion. If this didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. Um, During the depression, he had lost his job, and during that time when he had lost his job, I ended up getting into SharePoint. So my bump in salary ended up being almost his whole salary.
Wow.
Um, and because he was working as a correctional officer at the juvenile center. But he had moved from being a carpenter and then cement masonry and stuff like that, which they make money, which is kind of good for people, but not, $15 an hour nowadays is good, but it's still, you're still at the bottom rungs. So I was able to make up most of his salary, but then when we had, I think we had 2 kids then. He went back to work for a while, and then we realized, wait a minute, we're paying out your whole daggone check almost to the sitter. What the
Oh.
hell are we doing? It's like,
Mhm.
and then the rest of it's going out the door, to, like gas, extra gas, and all this other stuff. We was like, this is stupid. And I was like, I can't give up my career because I make the most money. So he was just like, fine, I'll do it. So he's been a stay at home. So if it wasn't for my husband, I don't think I would have been able to do it with 3 kids,
Wow.
being that I would have been face down in my work a lot of times, late with getting dinner on the table, late with picking kids up from school, whatever it is. Um, Also, my kids have been, we used to homeschool. I say we, my husband actually used to
Mhm.
homeschool my kids until until our last one became old enough to go into kindergarten, first grade, and then he was like, I can't teach all 3 of these kids. They're on all 3 different levels. I can't do it. So we put them in public school. But um, they kind of grew up with seeing, oh, mom's in a call right now. I'm not going to bother her. Um, and my kids are just so sweet and adapting that they learned to let it go. But my husband would always bring me back around to, okay, it's been like 4 days, you've been face down in this. It's Friday, you're taking this time off. And then we have to sometimes come to a compromise because I would still have work to do, especially when I was running a business. So finding balance is super, super hard. Even at Microsoft, now I'm trying to break myself out of this habit, but I still find where there are times that I'm still looking at the computer at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. Now that's
So,
better than the 11 or 12. So I've made
mhm.
some progress, but I'm still sometimes doing that. Last weekend, I took the weekend off, Labor Day weekend. No, was it last weekend? No, it was the weekend before. Whenever Labor Day weekend was, wow, everything's running together. Um, I took that weekend off because he was looking at me crazy. So
Oh.
sometimes you just need to have somebody to help you.
Mhm.
And if you don't have somebody to help you, enlist, like if you don't have a spouse or a significant other living with you, if you have a kid, get your kid to be like, look, mama, we're going to say that when I say that it's been this amount of time and you haven't done anything, let alone get up to go to the bathroom, maybe you should listen. Just tell them it's okay to tell me that, I haven't done this thing. I haven't been attentive. Help keep me on track. Get somebody to help you keep on track, or if you're good at this sort of thing, because I am not totally good at this sort of thing, um, is read up on time management. There's a lot of different books, a lot of different methods out there. Find the method that works for you and try to remember that you are only one person and you will die if you don't take some care. Then take care of yourself, and get enough adequate rest. One thing I had to realize is that sometimes I would work on something so hard for so many hours and then I'd go to sleep and I wake up with the answer. Sometimes
Hmm.
you got to remember that
That's a
that
new perspective.
yeah, working your brain to death does not work all the
No.
time.
All right.
So,
Well, we are at 8 o'clock, and I'm so
mhm,
grateful for all of your advice there, and your presentation was outstanding. And
thank you.
your support system there at the end was just amazing. That was nice to hear, and I think that gives us a lot to think about in our own communities and how we balance all of that. So if anybody has any follow-up questions after the presentation, Nikia's got her information on the screen. We'll also be posting the recording to a YouTube channel of hers after the session today. And then also, if you tune in next month, we've got Suzanne Hunt from New Zealand, who's going to be doing Women in Technology Down Under. So we're really looking forward to that one next month.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Very
thank you,
cool.
everybody, and have a lovely evening.
Have a nice evening, guys. Bye.